Hey everybody, David from Flash by BCycleNut here. Sorry I've been a little late getting some information out to you guys on the 2024 MT09. I've been busy. I was away for Father's Day weekend. Spent it with my father and just got back. And I was real busy when I got back, had a bunch to do, so now I'm trying to catch up. Doesn't mean I haven't been working on it. I was the one that sent one of my customers sent in the 24 ECU. I sent it off to Woolick so they could do the readout and add it to the software. Obviously, I was anxiously awaiting that to see how it compared to the 23 or 21 through 23 MT09. Initially, the fuel maps looked like they were totally different, but there's some, when you really look at them, they're not. And this video is just to show the settings, how they're similar and how they're a little different in the 24 versus the 21 through 23. After this video, when you watch it, I'm sure if somebody was to tell you that the 24 ECU is totally different with different algorithms and no way it could be used, I'm sure you would say that that was not true. And in meaning that that's not true, I wouldn't be calling them a liar. I would just be saying that it's wrong and not true. So here we go. Let's get looking at it. So this is the main screen. We'll see this in all of Woolick Racing. The main screen looks the same for pretty much all of them. You can see that I got it circled that this is the 24 through 25. MT09 USA and Canada, and you can see I have it labeled 2024 with 2023 settings put into it. So let's take a look at what those settings look like. First settings we're going to look at is the advanced settings, and these are really simple. We can see that the fan temps are still set to come on at 220. Of course, with the flash, we'll lower that to 195. Idle speed's the same, and we'll be able to disable the closed loop, which is the O2 sensor, disable fuel cut. We can disable the front wheel speed sensor fault code, which is very useful when we're dyno tuning. And we can disable the evap. Nothing real new there. Next, we can see that the rev limiter is set the same as the 21 through 23, 10,650. Usually bump that up about 300 RPMs to give you a little over rev, and just it pulls out there pretty close. So that's what we'll be setting it again with the 24. All right, so let's get to the first real interesting one. So this is throttle tables. This is for mode 1 and gear 2. And any run that's ridden 21 through 23 and now through 24 will get this weird sensation that the bike actually pulls harder in third gear than it does in second. And it's not your imagination. And you can see over on the right where I have, that's 100% throttle. So that's if you have your wrist turned to 100% and you're at the corresponding RPMs that are listed over on the left, that's the true throttle that you actually get. So you only are getting 30% throttle up to about 6,000, and well, actually less than 40 up to 6,500. Get a little small area between 8,500 and 95 or 10,000. It's 100%. And then we drop back down into the 80s, and that's what gives us that curve that falls off. So let's see how this compares when we load in the 21 through 23 throttle maps with the 24. So let's look what happens when we load the 21 through 23 MT09 throttle maps into the 24. And you can see we're still in ETV mode 1, throttle mode 1 with gear 2. And you can see that I'd have to set to value trim. And this is a really handy feature in the Woolick software. And it shows us how far it differs from stock. So we have some positive numbers. And that means that the 21 through 23 was more aggressive. We have some negative numbers. And that would mean that the 21 through 23 was less aggressive. So at 100% throttle, if we look all the way on the far right, we can see that they're almost exactly the same, down to about 8,500, 9,000. And then the new one is a little less restricted, but only less than 3% more throttle. We can see that for most of it, that the old bike was a bit more aggressive, especially between 65 and 8,000 RPMs in that 41 to 88. We can see some pretty big numbers where the old bike was more aggressive. Overall, if we look over at the early throttle openings, they're pretty close. I mean, you know, you're not going to feel a huge change on those, but you probably will feel those ones in the middle. Most of the throttle maps, if I went through every gear and mode, which I'm not, you'll see a similar pattern to this, except when we look at mode 4. When we look at mode 4, what we see is a ton of red. And what that means, it just means that mode 4 is more aggressive on the 24 than it was on the 23. So I spent a lot of time on the 21 through 23 with my throttle maps As I'm sure you know, I do a lot of street tuning, not just dyno tuning. And street tuning is the best place to tune throttle maps. On a dyno, you really can't get how they feel. At the racetrack, we're pretty much just asking it to pick up the throttle cleanly and then make full power. On the street is where you're using the most different conditions, the most different throttle maps, so I can really get a good feel for them. So fortunately, all of the columns and rows are all the same on the 24, so all of my throttle maps I will be able to cross over that I worked so hard on. Yay! This is another ETV limit table that's in the ECU, and this just gives us some hard limits so that no matter what we put in the throttle maps, if this ETV limit is set less than 100, you're not going to get more than it's on these tables. So you can see that the 24 has less restrictive, but I didn't look and spend an hour comparing these to where they actually are on the throttle maps. But let's just say we're going to take away all the throttle restrictions. This is one of the ones sometimes that your local tuner, if they're not familiar with the bike, might miss. And so they go in and they remove all the limits from the throttle tables. That traditionally that's all you have to do. And they're not familiar with this ECU and they don't know to remove the limits from this ETV limit table also. And this table right here is an ignition trim table. So what we have is for different gears, this is gear 1. We can, based off throttle position and RPM, we can actually, the ECU is set to pull some timing out. So, and we can see a lot of blue. So what that means is the 24, for the most part, except for like gear 5, is pulling a lot less timing than the old one did. And again, I worked really hard on these tables on the 21 through 23. All the columns and rows match up. So I'll be able to take that data from my 21 through 23 recording. Whoop, whoop. The next table we're going to look at is the Decel throttle tables. So this is what you get when you close the throttle. If you look at the gear and the RPM, it actually is opening the throttle a little bit. And we see that they're all white. And what that means is they're set exactly to how they were on the 21 through 23. Now, I spent, again, a fair amount of time massaging these to get the best feel that I could. And when I'm working on Decel tables, what I'm trying to accomplish is the least amount of engine braking, so it smooths out the on and off and just smooths out the bike in general, but still making it feel natural. It's a very unnatural feeling if you roll off the throttle and it doesn't feel like the bike decelerates enough. So we don't ever want that. So again, all the same columns and rows and all of that. This is always, again, best to do in street tuning. You cannot do these accurately on the dyno. The dyno has no load. The motor will spin for a long time anyway when you roll off. So these really are best tuned on the street and the track to get the feeling that you want. And again, my ones from my 21 through 23 that I worked really hard on will transfer over. All right, here's our ignition timing tables. And these are fair different, right? So this, again, mode 1, gears 1 through 6. We never change timing in neutral. Don't make any sense, and it causes idle issues a lot. So we can see, again, anywhere that it is red, that is the new bike is more aggressive. And any place that it was blue, the old bike is more aggressive. We can see throttle position across the top and RPM from top to bottom. And we can see in the 3,000 through 6,000 RPM and the smaller throttle openings, there's quite a bit more timing, like upwards of 12 degrees. That's a lot, guys. So that would make the new bike a lot snappier off the bottom. But we see there's a timing restrictions, more timing restrictions than the old bike at the larger throttle openings. So able to look at this again using my data that I got from the 21 to 23 at the optimal ignition timings that I got and compare them to this and see what's best in all situations. So this is pretty cool information. Really, really helps. All right, so what we're looking at here is the first fuel map we're going to look at, and this is TPS or throttle position. So there's two fuel maps in the ECU. There's an IAP or a pressure and a TPS, and that's what we're looking at, the TPS. And the two of them lay over each other, and then there's a bias for each one. So when we're in the lower RPMs and smaller throttle openings, we bias more towards the pressure table. And as we get to larger throttle openings and higher RPMs, we eventually transfer over to all TPS. So, and then when we look at this, we can see that there are not huge differences in the base fueling between the two of them. except for after 10,650 RPMs, which is past the red line. And this is just another limiter. So if you just went in and removed the stock rev limiter and raised it to, let's say, 11,000 RPMs, the bike's not going to make any more power because it's going to be pigly rich. If we look at most of the tables within a couple percent, nothing's more than, what's the highest number I see is about 5%. So this made me really confident that my old fueling maps that I came up with combined with my timing table. So the new bike, as you saw, has a lot of different timing numbers in it, and that is going to change fueling requirements a bit. So it all works together. So it's important that this is how you do this, and then you do everything together. It works as a package. When I get customers that want to start, pulling stuff out, it kind of makes me nervous because everything's meant to work together. So that's why you'll see some of these changes in fueling, because a lot of the ignition timing is different. So, but no major changes, right? And when we look at the IAP table, it's a lot of the same. We do got an area in the middle below 1,700 RPMs. We're a little, 6-7% more fuel on the new bike. But again, these all work together. So, anxious to get my 24 so I can do some testing. The airbox is a little different. We'll see, especially going to be interesting to start testing when they come out with new filters and stuff. Of course, we're looking at modifying the airbox and all that. And we'll see where it works out. So, but thanks guys for watching. Remember, hit that subscribe and like button for more motorcycle related content. And be definitely lots of 24 MT09 stuff coming out. Thanks.